Murfreesboro is so many wonderful things. It is a community atmosphere, great education facility, business opportunities for our youth.
Murfreesboro is my hometown. It's a place that I've been able to live in all my life. I was born and raised here, educated here, graduated from MTSU, and have had employment here in this community all these years, raised my family here, and been able to enjoy a wonderful life.
Murfreesboro is a friendly, happy community. Murfreesboro is well situated close to our state capital, so we have the benefits of all the medical, the educational, the recreational, and the athletic venues that are in the Nashville area.
Murfreesboro is special. Murfreesboro is special. It's unique. There's not another place like it. It's the best place in the world to be.
What defines a city? Is it the land in which to build? Or the places to live and work and play? Or is it the people who passionately craft their visions and dreams into a thriving community? With a rich tradition in civic, economic, and educational growth, Murfreesboro has been a staple throughout its 200 years in existence in the state of Tennessee. Murfreesboro's origins are traced back when this country was fighting for its independence. Hardy Murphree, a colonel in General Washington's army, was donated land in Tennessee, which included parts of Rutherford County.
Rutherford County was formed in the fall of 1803, actually got started in the spring of 1804. And the first county seat of Rutherford County was actually a little town called Jefferson, which was close to the town of present-day Smyrna on the forks of Stones River. But by 1811, the magistrates of the county wanted to move the county seat to Murfreesboro, or more centrally located in the county of Rutherford.
Well, Murfreesboro came about as a result of a number of different circumstances. I guess I would begin, though, with Colonel Hardy Murphree, a Revolutionary War officer who was given a military grant, substantial acreage in this region. But from his base in North Carolina, he became a very aggressive land speculator. And if you go back through the early deed records, it's apparent that he took an interest in Stones River and any property that was in or proximate to the Stones River. Hardy Murphree died in 1809, but in the last few years prior to that, he had been part of a very aggressive lobbying effort on the Tennessee legislature. And what they were trying to do was displace the city of Jefferson. In 1803, when Rutherford County was set up, Jefferson, an existing town, was named the county seat. When that happened, there was a land boom, and names like, the Ruckers, and William Nash, who owned most of the property up in that area, of course became very rich on top of what they already had as a result of that land boom. Well, these fellows on up the river, like Reedy on the East Fork and Murphree and Lytle and some of them over on the West Fork, obviously motivated, as I think was appropriate, by their opportunity to have a real boom, lobbied for about 5 or 6 years to get them to get the state legislature to move the county seat in their direction. Their argument was more centrally located, but nevertheless they made the argument and eventually prevailed. And they got a young legislator over in Williamson County who happened to represent this area as well. He had about 7 or 8 counties to sponsor the legislation. And the legislation said there's going to be a new county seat to pick the spot. And Rucker and Reedy both volunteered area over near their holdings, or in their holdings, and Captain Lytle offered it land in his area. And finally, in the spring of 1812, April, May, we don't have the exact date, but we know it was in the spring because it was at a picnic on the Lytle plantation. The commissioners took their final vote, and 4 of them voted for the Lytle property and 3 of them voted for the Rucker property. The Rucker property was over near where now is the Veterans Administration Hospital. So in about April 1812, we knew where the town was going to be.
Over the years, Murfreesboro was not believed to be the original name of the city. Cannonsburg was thought to be what the town was first called, but historians have discovered a different story.
It's a misconception that Murfreesboro was originally going to be called Cannonsburg, because from day one in the legislative minutes, the town was going to be called Murfreesboro in honor of Colonel Hardy Murphree, Revolutionary War soldier. So from day one in the books, what we found is that it was going to be called Murfreesboro.
There's only one place in the state of Tennessee, and maybe in the United States, that has ever been named Cannonsburg. And that's our little pioneer village that's there today and was set up in 1976 in connection with the American Bicentennial. When they prevailed upon the state legislature to find a site for a new county seat in Rutherford County, the young representative of this area, Newton Cannon, he was the one who wrote the legislation. And he said, there's going to be a new county seat. It must be centrally located. It must have good water. And these 7 people are going to be the town commissioners to study and select the site and name the 7 people that were to be the town commissioners. And in the last paragraph, he says, almost as a by the way or an afterthought, he says, and the name of this new county seat, wherever it is and whenever it's determined, will be Cannonsburg. And on the face of it, he obviously was trying to memorialize his name or his family name, ambitious in that sense. The date that was approved was about October 17, 1811. Early in November, exactly 3 weeks later, he puts in another private act. And it's exactly the same, except the last paragraph has been changed. And the last paragraph now says, and if and when it's located, it shall be named Murfreesboro.
The city is located in the heart of Tennessee, and that aspect played a role in Murfreesboro's first big moment in the statewide spotlight.
Murfreesboro has served as state capital from 1818 to 1826. The reason, again, was its central location. Murfreesboro is center in the county, but also the geographic center of the entire state of Tennessee. So the legislative powers, especially working in Murfreesboro, wanted to bring the state capital to Murfreesboro and get it out of Nashville. The reason being is obvious. We would have been Nashville if the state capital had stayed here.
There was a period of, I forget, 7, 8, 9 years, starting in about 1819, 1818, up until about 27, 26, somewhere in that period, when the legislature met in Murfreesboro. Before that time, the state legislature had met in East Tennessee, primarily in Knoxville, and at least one other place in East Tennessee. At the end of each session, which remember, as it's supposed to be now, is once every 2 years, they would adjourn to meet in, and they would tell where they were going to meet next. They met in East Tennessee in those early years because that was where the population was centered. The population center, though, was moving west. And when they adjourned the last session in Knoxville, or in East Tennessee, they decided that they should meet somewhere more central. And Murfreesboro was picked as the place. What's interesting is that the governor was never located here. The governor chose to stay in Nashville, and that was in part because the state bank had been set up in Nashville, and indeed as early as the mid-decade, the state prison, whatever it was called at the time, was in Nashville. And this was part of his administrative activity, so he chose to stay in Nashville.
So why did Murfreesboro lose the distinction of state capital? A number of factors included then Governor James K. Polk didn't want to move his current office in Nashville. Moving costs to Murfreesboro city administration was deemed too expensive, and a fear of a downgrade in the city's quality of life. As throughout the country at the time, plantation life was part of Murfreesboro's early days.
In the early 1800s, the first quarter of the 19th century, as you would expect, people made their living off the land. The more productive land you had or controlled, the more prosperous you were. Now, there were a few lawyers up in Jefferson. There were a few storekeepers. There were people who were dealing money, loaning money, but they were all providing services or living off the landowners.
Agriculture obviously taking up most of Rutherford County. So agriculture was big business, not only in Rutherford County, but all of the state of Tennessee, all over the southeast. Cotton, tobacco being the major crops, along with corn and other grains. But you know, cotton in the South, pre-Civil War, that would have been the driving force of this community.
One of the grandest homes in Murfreesboro was Oakland's. On 1,500 acres in the heart of the city, Dr. James Manny and his wife, Sally Murphree Manny, whose father, Colonel Hardy Murphree, had owned the land, constructed their home, which would evolve over the years to become the social center of the city. At the height of its popularity, the prosperity of Oakland's and Murfreesboro were about to be tested, as nothing could prepare them for what was to come, as the city would bear witness to the ravages of the Civil War and the battles on their own soil.
President Abraham Lincoln is, at the end of 1862, pushing all of his Army commanders to go out and seek a battle and a victory. One, to help bolster Northern morale, which is probably at one of its lowest points of the war, and two, to provide a victory to support the Emancipation Proclamation, which is scheduled to go into effect on January 1st, 1863. And so the fact is, this battle was being fought in part to provide Lincoln a victory to back it up, and that proclamation will reshape the entire war. It's the first shot towards ultimately eliminating slavery, and changes this war from one simply just to put things back together the way they were, to actually making a whole new country, the country we know today. You've got that is forcing the Union Army to move, and they'll meet the Confederate Army here in Murfreesboro. General Braxton Bragg is here with his 38,000 men strong Army of Tennessee, mainly to protect his supply base here in Middle Tennessee, and he's crossing his fingers that maybe he'll have the opportunity to somehow retake Nashville, but as it turns out through history, that's not likely to be the case.
The agriculture in the area and the railroad made Murfreesboro a desirable location for both the North and the South.
Murfreesboro is a small but very prosperous town when the war breaks out, mainly because of the rich agricultural production of this region, and that's actually what makes the entire area important to both sides, but perhaps more so to the Confederates. That's why Bragg is here. He is going to be feeding his army off of the bounty of Middle Tennessee and the area surrounding Murfreesboro. Of course, the railroad, the Nashville-Chattanooga Railroad, does run right through the town of Murfreesboro, and that railroad will be serving as the Union Army's line of supply as they head down towards Chattanooga.
On New Year's Eve, 1862, and into the first 3 days of 1863, the North and South exchanged blows, and when gunfire and the bellows of the cannon ceased, thousands of lives, both Union and Confederate, were lost.
That's awful. I mean, a 3-day fight here, and when it's all over, there are 23,515 men dead, wounded, or captured. Now, and of that, there's already 3,000 dead on the field. And think about this, there were 3,000 individuals living in the town of Murfreesboro. So there's as many corpses rotting on this field as there are people that live in the town. The hospitals in and around town will be bulging with more than 16,000 wounded.
As with many other areas across the South, Murfreesboro was left devastated due to the toll of the Civil War.
Colonel John Beatty, who wrote a memoir after the war, he was here with the Union Army in the Battle of Stones River, and in fact came back here in 1864. He actually describes Murfreesboro as a redbird, a cardinal. He thought that the town and the area here, when he first visited here in 1862, was some of the most beautiful, lush farmland, nice burgeoning little town. But what Beatty says is, when he comes back here in late 1864, he says the feathers have fallen off that red bird. In fact, the farmland around here would have almost looked like a desert. A lot of people just quit trying to farm against all the Union patrols coming out and foraging and everything else like that. The economy is ruined. Slavery is ended after the war, so the underpinning of the agricultural economy here is gone. It will take decades for Murfreesboro to recover.
By the turn of the century, as the 1900s began, Murfreesboro would start crafting defining elements of the city that have become its core. Many local businesses began to open primarily around the town square.
Business life was the square. The town was so small that the commercial center of the town was right here on the square. This is where you went to the hardware store or the grocery store, or to get a suit or a dress or a pair of shoes. You had to come to downtown Murfreesboro to accomplish that because this is the only place that served as the commercial center for the entire county. So all the businesses were family owned. There may have been a couple chains that came into Murfreesboro in the early 1920s, especially as we progressed to into the 1920s, 1930s. J.C. Penney's is a good example of that. Moved on the square in the early 1920s. But before that time and a little after that time, you had places like Shacklett's Photography right on the square, still in business today. Great example of a small town, family-owned business. City Cafe has been in existence since the early days, family-owned for a long time. The hardware store on the square, Holden's Hardware, been here a long time, family-owned. So that's kind of the feeling you get in downtown Murfreesboro on the historic square, are these family-owned businesses.
Murfreesboro's success in commerce and industry has not just been impacted by small business, as nationally known companies have also settled here. So, what has attracted these businesses to locate to Murfreesboro?
I think there are many factors that cause businesses to locate here, to stay here, to expand here. Industry as well as retail businesses. It's first of all the quality of life we have here in Murfreesboro and Rutherford County. I think our physical location, the geographic center of the state, proximity to Nashville. I think the tremendous work ethic of our citizens. They're willing to give a day's work for a day's pay and expect to be productive and make a contribution to their particular job.
A number of individuals can be identified as to why many major companies have called Murfreesboro home.
Going back a number of years, there were three names that particularly come to mind, and they are Al Mifflin, who was president of the Murfreesboro Bank and Trust Company, later becoming SunTrust, Tommy Martin, who was a representative of Mutual New York, and Jack McFarland, who was publisher of the Daily News Journal. Those three together, I think, really started the thrust of getting industry in our community. State Farm, General Electric, Samsonite, several of whom have gone on to other locations or have changed their work situation. I'll go back to Mr. Jennings Jones, who was mayor of Murfreesboro many years. Mr. Jones was an engineer and noted as a planner, and he laid out a lot of the development of Murfreesboro streets and roads to take care of our growth and development.
One component of a thriving city is government leaders with a keen vision. Murfreesboro has had a number of officials over the years that have laid out the blueprints to success.
I think as we look back, we can see that the Murfreesboro city government has certainly provided a great deal of stability, guidance, and vision for our city. I think as we look back over time, many of our projects, many of our initiatives have been a partnership between our city leaders and our community. This teamwork and this partnership has led to so many great things and has created this very thriving, prosperous city we know as home.
City government, elected government of Murfreesboro, I believe, has been a stabilizing force throughout our community. And the good part of it is that, for the most part, the elected officials are not in the hiring and firing part of government. We actually are taking citizen input and trying to understand how citizens can make a city better, how they can offer services to citizens through the taxpayer base that we are provided, and really think it's been an exceptionally good operation. We have an at-large council. They are nonpartisan. They have staggered terms. We do not have too many elected officials, and we don't have too few. I think there's a good blend. And I think in looking at a comparison with other communities, Murfreesboro has been favored for many years by adopting that form of government.
One common goal of many that have served in Murfreesboro's city government has been to look ahead to its future.
If I was going to sum up our city government in just a few words, I think we have, for a long time, tried to be the best we could be where we were. We've never been satisfied with the present reality. We're always trying to reach higher. We're always trying to get better. And so I think that has been a standing attribute of our city employees, of our city leadership, and the challenges put before staff by the city council, and that is continuing to strive to be better. We certainly, stand on the shoulders of those who have worked on behalf of our community for many, many years. But as you go back and you look, you think about the contributions of men like Jennings Jones and the planning he put forth for our city. Mayor Jackson certainly was a driving force as Murfreesboro began to grow very rapidly, and Roger Haley made long-lasting contributions to our city.
The importance of education has been at the forefront of the city's evolution.
Well, even before Murfreesboro was founded, Rutherford County and Murfreesboro have always been a mecca for education. In its earliest days, when Jefferson was founded, there was an academy at Jefferson in that small town called Jefferson Academy. As soon as Murfreesboro was founded, Bradley Academy came to the town. Bradley Academy has been located where it currently is today at South Academy Street since about 1830. Brick building was built there about that time and lasted through the Civil War. So Bradley kind of has this twofold history. Before the Civil War, served as an elite white male private school. James K. Polk went there in the early days of its founding. And that's just one example of the students that came out of Bradley Academy, who would later go on to be great people of America. After the Civil War, Bradley Academy was taken over as the African American school, given to the African American population of Rutherford County as the former slaves were becoming a viable part of this community in terms of their own businesses and residences and educational opportunities. The old building that had lasted through the Civil War was replaced in 1917, reopened in 1918. So Bradley has a very interesting, very intertwined history with Murfreesboro, being here since the founding days and lasting well into the 1950s. And today it's a museum and cultural center for the citizens of Murfreesboro and Rutherford County. In addition to Bradley Academy, for the boys pre-Civil War, there was a Seoul Female Academy, a finishing school for young females in this city. Seoul Female Academy was around in the 1850s and lasted well into the early 1900s. Union University, which today is located in Jackson, Tennessee, had its foundings here in Murfreesboro, right on East Main Street, where Central Magnet is located today. Union University started in the 1840s, lasted through the Civil War until about the 1870s before it moved to Jackson. Mooney School for Boys was at the far end of East Main Street, close to where MTSU is today. That was a significant training school for young men in the early 1900s that lasted for about a decade. And then another major school, college, was the Tennessee College for Women that was founded actually where Union University was and where Central Magnet is today, right there on East Main Street. That school opened about 1907, right before MTSU would open, and lasted until about the 1940s.
As our country moved into the mid-1900s, and the topic of integrating our schools during the Civil Rights Movement was discussed, Murfreesboro was again at the forefront historically.
When we first integrated the schools, to me, that was a defining moment when the community came together, and other cities were having big problems with this type integration. But Murfreesboro set the pace. We had a superintendent who said, I had hoped I'd wake up and I was dreaming, but it is true, it is the law, and we're going to abide by the law. This is your new assignment, and this is what we're going to do in Murfreesboro. And all went well with teachers, parents, and students with the new changes in education.
Baxter Hobgood served as city school superintendent for 30 years and was called Mr. Education, the father of Murfreesboro City Schools. Hobgood and several other pioneers strived for education in Murfreesboro to be the best it could be.
One of the early pioneers really was a person whose name is on the library at Patterson Park, and that's Myrtle Clanton Lord. She was responsible for Patterson Park being built But more than that, she was an educator, and she realized the impact of Patterson Park on the community. So she extended beyond the school walls into the community, and I think that that's still a philosophy we have today. I think that Ruth Bowden and her work with Classroom on Wheels, I think the emphasis on early childhood education, certainly she was a pioneer nationally. I think John Hodge Jones, who was our superintendent, I think he was a pioneer. I think what he did with the extended school program, with looking at time and learning, with realizing that the school day doesn't just have to run from 8 until 3, I think he was vital. I think that Robert and Mary Scales and what they did with their life, just modeling education, although she certainly was an educator and the first African-American college professor, and as you know, her pioneer work as far as being a woman. But I think that the fact that they had children in their home, not just their own children, but their neighborhood children, I think that that modeled a kind of educational philosophy for us.
Not only does Murfreesboro take pride in its public education system, the city can claim the largest undergraduate university in the state. For 100 years, Middle Tennessee State University has provided students the education needed to be leaders in their own communities, and many graduates have gone on to have impacts on our country.
We take great pride in having Middle Tennessee State University here. Teachers can have workshops, we can keep up to date on what's happening in education. The university works with the school system, and we're abreast of the new trends in education, and teachers will have an opportunity to go back, take courses, and get abreast of what's happening in education. So it has played a great part in the education system in Murfreesboro.
Middle Tennessee State University gives us a flavor that other communities are lacking. You have the aspect of the educational institution, you have the athletic events that it brings to the community.
For 200 years, Murfreesboro has been leading the way in government, commerce, and education. The city has forged a reputation as one of the best places to live and raise a family. So, what's to come for Murfreesboro?
In the next 5 to 10 years, I see Murfreesboro continuing on a path to be one of the best run, one of the most tax efficient communities, if not in the state, in the region. I think our Parks and Recreation Department's exceptional. I think our police and fire departments are exceptional. I think the road network that we're promoting and providing has given us all an ability to get through town, even though it may take us a little while to do that. Many of us who've lived here all our lives know that there used to be just one town. Now we have communities and neighborhoods spread out over 60 square miles.
I think with all the growth that has happened, this community has achieved a certain momentum. That snowball that rolls downhill continues to get bigger. And because there are so many exciting things happening here, people look at Murfreesboro and they see opportunity, they see success. I think that is going to continue to lead this community in a positive direction.
I think Murfreesboro is going to be a great place for corporate headquarters for different companies in Murfreesboro. We have our new Middle Tennessee Medical Center that's just opened up. I think you'll see things that will spring off of that. Middle Tennessee, obviously with Nissan in Rutherford County, you're going to see a lot of automotive industries come into our future with our infrastructure as far as our interstates, our exits, close proximity to when 840 gets completed around the beltway of Middle Tennessee. The future of Murfreesboro is unlimited. What you're going to see as far as job growth and opportunities for people to have employment. And along with that, you'll see the other things that'll come along with that. You'll see great entertainment. You'll see great places to live, great communities. We want safe neighborhoods and things like that, which will make Murfreesboro, I think, the place to live in Tennessee.